The societal dynamics between the older generation and the younger generation has certainly shifted into a low trust society. And in the past, there used to be this societal contract where the younger generations are used for their productivity because they have more energy, and the older people who cannot keep up, in return they provide wisdom to the younger generation, like life advice or career advice, and they basically provide this sort of wisdom to help the younger generation grow. And that's basically the societal contract that we once had, which was a high trust society. Because older people who are much more fragile, they tend to be weaker than the younger generation. So what's stopping the younger person from maybe robbing or stealing from the older generation? It was basically this societal contract, this high trust society that we used to run on. And recently I can see us turning into and going into this low trust society where this societal contract has basically is basically abolished, right? It has been broken because the trust has been gone. And I would like to say it's really weird because the boomers, right? They literally feel that I can't sort of say, like, are they entitled? I know they feel like we are entitled, but in a sense, they are holding up all the assets. They are holding up everything, and they are giving more. I wouldn't say advice. It's more of criticism. Gen Z is lazy. Gen Z is selfish. Gen Z, every single negative connotations with Gen Z. But the thing is, the word that was given to us was passed down by them, right? So now we have two things. The wisdom that they give does not apply to us anymore, and they are basically having all the assets, right? So one thing I would like to say is that we cannot really blame them for the bad advice, because advice for generations that we had was basically passed down because technology wasn't evolving as fast, right? So because of technology not evolving as fast as like the previous generations, the older that you are basically means that you had more wisdom, in a sense, because you have lived through more lived experience. But because of technology evolving, this lived experience that we have no longer has a relation, right? If you take a look at the AI advancement in the past 4 to 5 years, right, it has grown so exponentially that basically it's being able to replace jobs. It is able to replace thinking for humans, right? And it's only going to grow even further. So as the years pass by, technology has evolved exponentially, and it has made the live experience, basically the wisdom of the older generations, redundant and useless. So that's something I would like to say, that we cannot really put the blame on them for this. But what I can say is that right now is that the boomers are holding up all the assets, and the younger people are being exploited for their youth, their energy, and their productivity, basically. So the younger generation no longer has a reason to even use the productivity to support the older generation. So, and the boomers basically can't give any advice or good advice other than criticism to the younger generation. The societal contract basically is being, or have already broke in most countries already. And it's only gonna get worse from here, right? And the thing is, unless there is a revolution or a certain societal dynamic change, there would continue to be distrust. And what I dislike about this is that we no longer feel human, in a sense, because when we run through this, when we were a high trust society, uh basically country, right, we could afford to trust one another. We could afford to trust the advice of the older generation, for because their advice will be for our own good. We do have their advice. We take their advice in mind, thinking that they are giving us this advice to help us grow as a individual. But the thing right now is the dynamic is pretty weird because the advice is no longer advice. The advice is more of you are lazy, you are selfish, you are whatever, you are causing the world to, you know, like you are running the world down or something like that. And it's more of criticism rather than helpful advice, basically. So, in a world of low trust society, why I dislike about this is because it takes away the humanitarian aspect, and secondly is that it would eventually lead to a lot of violence that will run through around the world. Because if the younger generation no longer has the need for the old people who are basically useless in terms of productivity, we can just do whatever we want to the older generation, basically take all over their assets, take everything that they have, and leave them up in the ditch or ditch. And when the world comes to that, it's basically gonna be very dirty, very nasty, and I wouldn't want to live in a world like that. So that's one thing that I don't really get on why the boomers feel sort of, I can't say, I don't know if the word is entitled, but feel, I would say, arrogant to think that they are in the position that they're in it, and they would have been or stay in the position that they're in, which is having up all the assets and not being able to provide any sort of value to the younger generation. um this is what I'm saying, and I really hate to see us transform into a low trust society where we cannot afford to trust one another, right? So, yep, hopefully something would change.